Stand by. Yeah.
All right, good evening and welcome to our study session. Our only item on the study session agenda tonight is our equity goal, which is will be an update by our equity program manager, John Hennington.
Good evening, councilors, mayor. Just back before you to give an update on our equity goal. It's a brief update today. A lot coming up, but because there's a lot coming up, thought it's a good time to sort of let you know where we've been and then talk about where we're going. There's a lot coming up in the next fiscal year. And so just wanted to give you a brief recap of what's happening. The biggest thing happening right now is the Equity Steering Committee. I know that was something that this council was very interested in having get to work. We have an amazing group of people who are really reinventing what it means to be a committee for a city. It's been a lot of fun watching them work through this, trying to find ways to sort of shake off the sort of dominant culture norms of how committees work. So that's why we haven't come before you with bylaws yet. The group is still trying to decide if they want to do bylaws, if they want to remain more flexible. I think they're leaning towards bylaws, but what those bylaws look like will not be something that you've seen with another committee. This is a group that is decided on a consensus-based decision-making model. Right now they're doing the five-finger voting model. I think we will codify that. And in doing so, they have decided to focus on whether a topic is something they should be working on rather than whether they're coming up with the right answer. So if there is a lack of consensus on an issue, they've given themselves some time to come back to the issue and talk about not, okay, well, why didn't you like that? But what are the issues being raised? What are the concerns? And they give themselves a limited amount of time to talk about that. If they're able to come to a consensus through that discussion, great. If they're not, they will have another meeting. And that meeting is entirely based on whether or not this is the right thing. So they don't go back and sort of, try to beat each other into coming to an agreement, but really taking another look at reframing the initial question. Maybe we're just approaching this wrong. If we can't come to a consensus, this is probably not the right answer. So it's experimental. It may work. It may be a dumpster fire. We don't know. But right now they are working through this and trying to figure out how to make this work when they're still part of this overarching structure that is still we have meetings, we have agendas, we have schedules, things are going to happen, we're going to adopt budgets. And they're very aware of the fact that if we move too slowly, things will pass them by. So they're trying to find that balance to be very thoughtful, to really think, be very intentional about how they approach topics, and yet still being able to be effective. So that'll take some time to get there, and there'll be some, some false starts, but it's been a really remarkable group to watch work. We do have one vacancy currently. The reason we have not tried to fill that vacancy early before the interviews coming up is because the group did specifically request that we try to find a young person to be a member. This is separate from the youth member pilot that we've had going on. They really don't want that to be sort of this, we have our committee and then they're concerned about that youth member feeling almost as an accessory, as opposed to being an integral part. So they would like to have someone who just happens to be a younger person rather than having a youth member. If there's no one who fits that bill, they're perfectly fine with that, but they would love for us to try. And that's because one of the areas of focus for this group are young people. They feel like as we start talking about equity, that there are a lot of young people in our community who are already very much thinking about these issues. They are very involved, and they would love to have that voice as part of this group. So it's a dynamic group. They're really interesting. They have very strong opinions. They have very different opinions, and it's really it's been quite a learning experience for me to see them work together and find ways to tackle some really tough issues for our community. They're going to be really critical for us coming up in the next couple of years as we start to give them more things. Already we've taken the procurement rules that we presented to you a couple months ago before them, where they had some a couple areas they wanted to talk a bit more about, so we're going to bring that before them again this month before we bring the final draft to you for adoption next month. So that's one of the issues, body-worn cameras. We brought our officers came in, had a conversation with them about those. Really great conversation around those, and working on building a relationship. That's something that's very important for this group. They want to be partners with our law enforcement, and our officers have been very open to that. So really looking forward to building that relationship, getting to know each other, getting to understand both the concerns that exist in the community and the concerns that exist in law enforcement, and how those two things can be used, how those two different parts can be brought together to have a dialogue on how we can improve policing in Milwaukee and hopefully be a model for other communities around us. So that's really our equity steering committee. I'm really thrilled with the people that are there. I'm so grateful to them for their time. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of reading. They have been very, very thoughtful about this work, and I really want to express my appreciation to them.
Can I ask you a question
Please.
before you move on?
Absolutely.
Have you, because they're setting the kind of the parameters, have you taken an issue to them and they've decided, we don't want to deal with that one, or put it way down the line or whatever?
That's a great question. So the first meeting we had with them, we asked them, what do you want? What do you want to talk about? You sort of get to define this. And I had a couple of sheets of paper up on the board there. They're at my office now. And everyone threw out ideas, 3 or 4 ideas that were their personal favorites. And then we asked them to pick their top 3, but they couldn't pick their own. Which created some interesting decisions as people sort of had to navigate, but I really want that. And so we know what the 3 big things are, which are they want to involve youth in the community. They want to bring them into this work and have them feel involved in the city as a whole. So not just on equity work, but they want young people to feel a part of Milwaukee. They want to work on events. Now, we haven't had these conversations in detail, but they want to have opportunities to activate the city in ways that communities, members of various communities of color, LGBTQIA community, can get together and feel safe and welcome and a part of a broader city. So they want to find ways to do that. What that looks like, that's probably a further down the road conversation, but that's one of the areas of focus for them. They also wanted to focus on the houseless community and ways to, they talked about, Dignity Village and ways to do that. Now that's a big lift. That's a big top subject to tackle. And what that, how they suggest we work on that, I'll probably be back to talk to you about that at some point. So we started with that. So we knew kind of their big things. And we also committed that entire list, it's a monster list, nothing's going away. Even if you didn't get to vote for your own thing, it's still up there. We will get to it. What we said is we're going to sort of have to do this push and pull. We're going to take things from the list that is really important to you, but there are also going to be things that I'm going to say, hey, I really need you to look at this issue. It may not be on your favorite list, but we really need to talk about this because this is going to have a big impact, and we don't want this to go by without you having a chance to look at it. So that was sort of the initial agreement, and that's kind of how we have been balancing it. Basically, one of yours, one of ours. Sometimes those things align, and sometimes not. But that way, we're able to make sure that we're continuing to keep them engaged in the things that are important to them as a group. But we're also not missing those opportunities to bring things before them, such as procurement. It was not on their list, shocking. But once we brought it before them, boy, they had thoughts. And so, bringing those things, it's impossible for a group like this to see all the parts. And so we definitely want to see, them to take a look at the things that are important to them, but we also want to have opportunities to bring these things that we know are going to have an impact, like procurement, before them. So that's what we're doing now, and we'll see how that goes. There may be some point they say, no, we don't really want to talk about that. But so far it's been that we set that expectation from the beginning, and that's worked out so far.
John, can I just add one thing?
Please.
Just so you're all prepared, we've been really clear with the group about some things are administrative and some things are legislative. Some things come to you, some things are with me or with Luke. And so we're there to actually get direct feedback. In other cases, this is an actual, we're asking them to vote or have a decision recommendation to you all. If they can't get to the point where they have a recommendation, they don't have consensus, they're not going to forward something. In that case, what you're going to see from us instead is these were their thoughts. There were some pros, there were some cons, there were some concerns, but they wanted to make sure that they weren't negating the voice of another person at the table. So you may not get what you would typically see from another board, which is, yeah, we're in. It's not going to be a majority rules on this. So just be prepared. I think the first place we're going to see that is probably going to be the purchasing. I think we're going to have a great dialogue. We already have, and there's some very strong opinions on both sides of it. So we're going to say there's consensus around these things. There's not consensus around these things, and you all need to weigh in and make a decision about where you think you should go. Okay? Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I look forward to seeing how they navigate that. I served on a board at one point years ago, 20-something years ago, that was a consensus model board. And we got nearly nothing done for a year and a half. And then we landed on a rule that was like, I don't even remember what we called it, but it was consensus -1. It's like literally there could be one outlier. And strangely enough, that was all it took to finally start to get to decisions where we could move along. Because very often, the thing we were trying to do, there was one person on the board that had a problem with it.
Well, and
To throw it out there.
No, and I appreciate that. I think that's part of why we're also describing that this won't stop a project. And we've been clear with the group as well. It is simply they don't want to have something assigned to the whole if it's not actually the whole. So I think that this is, John and I have talked a lot about balancing how many times we take something back. That's why he's developed in partnership with them this model where first meeting, this is how it goes. Second meeting, this is how it goes. But by the third meeting, we're here. So that it doesn't just stop the work of the city, but it also doesn't force them into a position of having to be definitive about something that's not definitive.
Yeah. Well, the resident Quaker approves. This process sounds eerily familiar. One thing that this may not be helpful to this group at all, but one thing I would observe from the way Friends practice consensus decision-making is that there are times when the group cannot reach consensus, or in Quaker circles, we would call it unity, which has slightly different connotations. And it can be an option for someone, if this genuinely represents the way they feel, to say, I stand aside from this decision. So you're not saying that you agree with whatever the consensus position is, but you're also acknowledging that your disagreement is not so much that it should stop forward motion. So it's just a nuance of conversation that may be useful at some point in the future.
Yeah, that pretty much describes what I was just talking about in a better way than I said it. It was like I said, it was a long time ago.
Well, we've had 400 years to come up with it.
They probably just copied it from it.
Well, and part of the five-finger voting is to allow people to say, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I don't love it,
Yeah.
but it can move forward.
That flexibility, someone can say, yeah, I'm not opposed enough that I want to
Right.
completely dissent. Basically, what they've set the bar at 2. So if someone is a 2 or a 1, that's not consensus. If there are 3 or more, so if someone's a 3, okay, I'm good with it. But they're not. It's not, something that they're ready to run with and take up as a project that they would want to lead. So, we will see. I mean, so far, we've only had a few topics come before them. Procurement will be a very interesting one because, again, very strong opinions, really principled views on it, and it's going to be a great discussion. And we'll see where they land. And, we may have a consensus, we may not. And that's okay. We will be very transparent with you about what that looked like and where the concerns were and why. Which unfortunately is not always super helpful to you because you don't get a definitive yep or nope. But we'll let you know where the conversation landed and go from there. So we're still working through it, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves over time. Again, that's why we don't have bylaws yet. This group really wanted to work with it and have that flexibility to do so, and we've intentionally not arbitrarily forced them to say, nope, you have to set everything in stone right now. And it gives them some time to sort of get to know each other and get a sense of how this works as they're learning. So we're learning together. It's been an interesting process, but I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah. So I know at the beginning, Ann and yourself talked about not giving them too much to do, right? Like not, because equity work is done with a lot of Black and brown folk do a lot of the equity work, the heavy lifting. And I just want to make sure, is there a way that you're checking in with folks that, lets you know whether or not they're, like right now, I'm not in a good spot to do equity work, right? Because it's hard. It's really hard. And, there's a lot of cultural taxation and racial fatigue. So is there a way for folks to check in or for you to check in with them to see where they are?
Thank you for asking that. A few things. So we acknowledge from the very beginning that there is an enormous amount of emotional labor involved in this work. And a small thing that we do is that this is a committee that we make sure we feed. It's a small thing, but it means that someone doesn't have to choose between preparing and actually having these very hard conversations. They can, focus on this and know that their family is going to have food, and so that's one of the things that we've been very intentional about. Another thing is that right now our meetings we were hybrid. We've now basically gone remote because we found that it was actually really hard to have these conversations with 7 boxes and then a view of a room. That it wasn't working so well, and so we are now for the people who do need to be here because of accessibility issues, we give them a computer so that everyone has their own little box. And doing that, we were able to uphold one of the things that was decided at the very first meeting, which is that it is always okay to turn your camera off. If a conversation is hard, if you're just not feeling it, it's okay. We're not going to tell someone, nope, we need to see you. Because sometimes you just need to be there, listen, but take a step back. We have always someone who you can reach out to. So, unfortunately, one of our committee members who had to resign due to enormous amounts of work, and I just want to say, Amira, I don't know if you're listening, but we miss you. But thank you so much for what you brought. And one of the things that you brought right in the very first meeting was having someone. In this case, we have a couple of people in the group who you can just talk to If you need to step out of the room and decompress with someone, we can take that moment to do that. So we're trying to find ways to do that, to be trauma informed as we work through this. It's difficult, and it's difficult because we also have this weird clock going, right? Because the meeting can only be so long. So finding ways to do that so someone can safely step out of a meeting and also still be able to provide that feedback. What that looks like, how that flows, we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't had that happen yet, but I imagine at some point it will. We need to figure that out. And sometimes we actually have had moments where we've just simply stopped and taken a moment. And so it will look different in every meeting. It will depend on the situation, but being very aware of one another and where people are, and the fact that sometimes someone just needs to take a step away, step off camera, walk away from the meeting and come back. It's hard work. And it's very much appreciated work, but we're also willing to listen to feedback. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes, I will, do something dumb in a meeting that doesn't quite work, and I love this group will tell me, nope, that wasn't it. Try again. And we learn from that. So we're learning as well. But this is a unique group. This is not like any other committee that I've worked with. And it requires, there's a lot of EQ involved in this work, and reading the room and understanding when we need to maybe sometimes just take a moment. So again, my gratitude to the group for really looking out for one another, and they really do. And if I'm not seeing something, sometimes we chat with each other and just make sure that we are checking in and making sure that everyone's okay. Thank you for that question.
If it's okay, I'd also like to add, there's some benefits to me being in the room and there's some negatives. So we have a very transparent conversation. And actually this last time I had a very transparent conversation of, this may be a time you don't want me here. Do you want me to leave? And they know, I think, because they've said yes at one point, I think they know it's safe enough to just have me check out, come back when they're ready. It's not a problem, and I want them, it's more important that they feel safe and they feel like they can have a discussion without me in the room. But I also want them to have the access to the power, because honestly, that's the piece, that's how this group knows how much we care, honestly, is that they get to have direct access as often as they need to have success.
Any other questions on the Equity Steering Committee?
I have a logistics question.
Sure.
I'm just wondering what sort of steps you're taking to find that much desired youth member for the committee, or rather to find applicants for that position.
We've asked the committee, because they're the best place to reach out to people. I know we have some applicants who are younger. I don't know how many have applied specifically for equity steering, but I know there's some younger applicants in the pool. It's a hard thing. We are going to be at Milwaukie High School. Really, my thanks to Carmen for inviting us to table during their Pride event on June 3rd. So we'll be there and hang out with them for their lunch periods, and hopefully we'll find some interest there. But it's tough, because we all know the challenges for people in high school. They've got this test and that test and prep for this and 14 sports and to play. How do they find time for this? So finding someone who has that interest and the time to do it is going to be tricky. And we may not find it right away, but we know that it's something that we're aspiring to. So for now, it's been just really focusing on these members, looking for people in their circles, and then we're going to be at the school, and also just at events we have, letting people know.
And is the focus really on someone who's in high school, not someone who's 20 or 21?
Not necessarily. I mean, if someone's, they didn't say, hard limit, this age range, but they would like a younger member. It's a pretty broad range of ages in the group as it is, and we have some people in their 20s. So I think that they were thinking maybe high school, but again, sometimes that's just not feasible. And also, again, this work is really, really hard. This is
that's the thing. Like, if you're going to find a high school student that's already doing this work, I mean, you're going to add on more, and they're 18, and their brains are still developing. And it's really asking a lot for a high schooler who's doing this, because they're probably being pulled in so many different directions as it is. So, yeah, I like the idea of a little bit older than high school, or if someone's in high school, they don't have as many commitments, because, you know, we were all 18. We all know what it's like.
And I think even for the adults, I mean, this is work that, you know, you can't help it. It follows you a little bit. You know, you take some of it home. And so I want to be very, very cautious about that as well. So ultimately it will be, I'm not sure who's going to be on the panel for those interviews, but something that will be something to consider is that really what is the capacity, what is the emotional maturity of someone for this? Because this is real emotional labor at times. And not always. I mean, you know, I think I said in the first meeting that I hope we spend 50% of our time laughing and 25% of our time crying. But that's a real thing. There will be a significant amount of this is hard. Yeah. These are hard conversations. These are real world impacts, and you feel them. So that's the hard part, is finding the right fit there. You know, I don't know that's even appropriate. Honestly, we may actually go look at the group and go, nope, there's no one in that age range who really is the right fit for this. And I think that's okay, and I think the group would understand that. But the fact that they have that interest is expressed, we'd like to, you know, at least try to look for someone younger, with the recognition that we may not find that person right now.
To Counselor Nicodemus's point, it might be really useful to reach out to Casey at Clackamas Community College, because, I mean, they have so many non-traditional students that are older that it's not a perfect fit, but she's doing fantastic equity work for the community college and may know someone who just comes to mind, or she can help get the word out. You know, it's probably someone nobody knows who has that capacity because they're not already doing 50,000 things.
That's an excellent point, and I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. She's just doing wonderful work there. She and I are trying to connect right now. So
perfect reason.
I will bring that up when we speak. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on equity steering? So next I wanted to talk about our cultural community celebrations, and our community cultural celebrations, and what I should have labeled this as community-led cultural celebrations. The city has a lot of events, and events take a lot of capacity. And I have a sense from my colleagues that capacity is pretty darn full. Like, there's a lot going on in the city, and it takes a lot of work to do that. And yet we wanted to make space for our communities to have these cultural celebrations, for us to acknowledge these important moments in our community, and find a way to do that in a way that was sustainable. So what we've done and where we are right now, and this is still a work in progress, and the Equity Steering Committee will probably have something to say about this when it comes around. But right now, what we're trying to do is for community-led cultural celebrations. So Juneteenth was the first of those last year. Pride last year was sort of that. It was actually an NDA, but it was with some city support, very little at the time because the NDA was really taking the lead on that. But things like Pride, making a space so that community members can celebrate their experiences, their lives, their culture, in a way that the city says, we see you, we recognize you, we support you, but that we don't take ownership of those events. So that was very important for Juneteenth, that we be there, we provide the support, we provide some framework so that can happen and help build that capacity in the community without it being, you know, the city of Milwaukie presents Juneteenth. That's not what we wanted. And so, you know, we learned a lot of things. We probably overextended ourselves and realized that what we did with Juneteenth last year really wasn't sustainable. So finding a way to balance that. So what we're doing right now is trying to put some funds towards these events. Right now, I'm trying to target around $500 for these events. We assist with the permits that may be needed for the event, helping with the planning, providing just some resources to help these events go. We do the printing if the event needs printing, and we promote them on social media. That is where we're trying to find that spot. I say that, and I'm going to undermine that because we're putting on a Pride event next month. And the reason why we're putting on a Pride event next month is that in our conversation with some of the community members who had led Pride in previous years, there just wasn't the capacity. It just was a case of, you know what, can't do it this year. Totally get that, and I apologize for the beeping. Just not the capacity this year. What we didn't want to do was in that space sort of step back and let there be nothing, because we had a lot of people show up for a Pride event last year, and we didn't want to have that sort of be an empty space. So we are basically holding a placeholder event this year, a place where people can get together and gather and celebrate Pride. It's going to be on June 4th. It's a Saturday from 10 o'clock till noon. We'll be over at Main Street Plaza across from Dogwood Park. And it's going to be a small gathering. Now, if any of the other community members want to have events, maybe the NDAs, we would love for people to come and join us there. If they want to have an event on another day, we're totally supportive of that as well. But we wanted to make sure that there was a place that people could come and gather. And hopefully next year, that's a placeholder for when community members are able to say, yeah, I feel like I'd love to doing that this year. With your help, we can do this. And then we have to turn it back over to them. But we really want these to be community-led events. The way Juneteenth was last year, the way Juneteenth will be this year. That event is happening on June 18th. That's also a Saturday. I believe that's 11 o'clock to 11 to 3. Thank you, Councilor Nicodemus. From 11 to 3. And that'll be at Water Tower Park. So the idea is that we will have these events and hold space for other events as other community members come together and say, hey, this is something that we would like to celebrate. But we want them to be community-led. So we don't want to take on these events and take over them and put the city stamp on them. But we definitely want to make sure that people feel seen and heard and welcomed by the city. That may not be the model. It may not be the permanent model, but right now that's where we are. I really want to hear from the Equity Steering Committee, and as we do these, we'll learn and we'll adjust as we go. But there may be some questions as to why we're throwing a Pride event this year. Well, that's why. Is that talking to community members, and they were just like, yeah, not there this year, and that's okay. But we want to make sure we still hold space for that, for people to come and celebrate, and we'll have some fun things to do as well. I have some. All of you have these. Lovely Pride stickers and magnets. Really want to thank Jordan Emla, our communications director, who did these beautiful, beautiful designs involving the colors of the Progress Pride flag that we have now adopted for the city. I love these, and they're gorgeous. We're going to have some lawn signs as well. So we'll be giving those out at the Pride event. People often come and ask for them, and we'll give them out as long as we have them. But we wanted to make sure that we were saying, we see you. We hear you. We know you're here. We welcome you and honor you who you are. So that's where we are right now. That may shift over time as we refine this, but that's what we wanted to do for now, to make sure that we were able to support these communities, but do so in a way that we don't basically burn ourselves out and we can't do it in the future. We wanted to make sure that it was sustainable for the long term. So any questions about our community events and how we're approaching them right now?
I have one. Well, so how do we work towards where people aren't always asking, is the city sponsoring this, and make it more a community thing? Because like you said, when it's a community event put on by the community, the sense of belonging gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if we could get away from, is the city sponsoring this event, to getting more community members to bring, maybe even bring it to I don't want them to bring it to the equity committee, because they'll have their hands full. But like, I could do more, right, to make sure that all the community is heard. This council could do more to make sure people feel comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, I have this idea, what do you think about it? So how do we do that? And I know you're all at capacity right now, so I'd just like to think about how we can get the word out more. Maybe it's on Facebook. I don't know. I would like to get more community and less city.
I think that's, thank you, Councilor Nicodemus. I think that's one of the reasons why we have set the support level at fairly limited support. $500 is pretty modest. And we really didn't want to go over that because it ends up becoming something that really feels like a city event. And we really wanted to keep the community feel of these events. But also make sure that there's enough support, that there's the capacity there, right? Because there has to be that capacity for community members to do it. It's a lot of work to put on an event, and we recognize that. So how do you balance those things? And that's why we're willing to sort of shift it and sort of see what works and what's the sweet spot for that. I think you said it perfectly that, as when the community is leading an event and it feels like a community event, that involvement grows. People feel like, oh, this is for me, this is by me, I can be a part of that. I have an idea for that, I can add to that. How we actually bring people together around that is honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I think we're still trying to figure that out. Also, I think all of you know the history of a lot of events that started off as community events that became city events over time. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we also wanted to avoid. Not because we don't want to do that. We don't have the capacity to do that, so there's that. Unless this council decides, hey, we want to do that, right? But what we didn't want to do is take on these events that would eventually become city events. What we're trying to do is make sure that they really are staying in the hands of the community members who are leading them. What I would say is I think the best way for that to happen is for us to do these events. And Juneteenth last year was an incredibly diverse crowd of people. Not just, Black folks who live in the area, but people of all different backgrounds showed up at that event. And I think it's saying, this is something that we're willing to do. We're willing to support you and having those conversations. So I think it's at those events talking about that. And if people sort of express, hey, I would love to celebrate this. Well, you can. At some point, I probably have to, a call comes to me. That's fine. I am totally okay with that. In fact, I love that because I would love to help people build that capacity because we get something out of it too as a city. Mm-hmm. As we build capacity in our communities of color and other groups who have been historically marginalized, that capacity and that connection with us means that we hopefully can make a relationship that's lasting. It's not transactional with those communities to say, hey, we really would love to hear from you on this or that. And so we build on that. So we actually get something out of that relationship and hopefully it lasts for a long time. It's hard to build lasting relationships with communities that have not traditionally been involved with government for a very good reason. There's trust barriers to overcome. There's, why would I bother barriers to overcome? And so for us to build those relationships, and if it comes out of these events, great. Any way that we can bring people together, we're happy to do it. So I will make the time if someone has something that they would like for us to celebrate, for us to sit with them and figure out how we can help support that. But again, to get back to your actual question, your original question, how do we do this without people saying, when's the city doing this? That's really hard, and it's a tough thing. To find that balancing point. There was if you were at the park kickoff event we had at Scott Park on Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, May 1st, we had a postcard from our equity program that had upcoming events, and I indicated on that card which events were community-led events, which ones were city events. That's a small thing, but ultimately I think people still sort of think it's ours, and that's a hard line to walk. And I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't. I think we figured that out over time, and I think we let the community members lead. I think in letting community members tell us, hey, this worked. And we'd actually like to have a little less city involvement in this, and maybe a little bit more of this. I think we sort of figure that out. But over time, I think it'll depend on the event exactly, in the community, honestly, what the right mix is for each event.
Well, and, I think some of it is also how we start talking about it. And I think you're right that we all have a big role to play in that. And so, I think maybe you start the conversation with, if you had $500 available to you to celebrate something, what would you do with it? Would you host, during Ramadan, host an Eid dinner so that people understood what it was like to break your fast? Would you host a pride parade? Would you host, a Kwanzaa? I don't know. You could come up with a bazillion different celebrations, because celebration is one of the defining elements of culture, right? But really posing that as a question, that is an invitation, I think is a good way to go. And I was also thinking about the part where you're going to be at the high school right before the Pride celebration that we are hosting this year, and just thinking that it would be so wonderful to have that invitation extended to the students to know that we are available as a resource for them to throw something, and I know that Anne, the teacher who's really kind of the coordinator of what happens at the school, could be a point person to kind of keep carrying that story forward, because you need that when you've got so much turnover. I've spent time with high schoolers, and it's that's how your life is at that point. But having one consistent adult who can bring it up each year with the new students is really helpful. And just to say, we're here as a resource, you're part of our community, you're doing great things at the high school. If this is a place where you would have some inclination to lead, let us know. We'd love to talk to you. And about any of things, the dance troupe does amazing things, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, you get my point.
I really appreciate that. I would love to build a lasting relationship there. Again, with the work with the parks, with the equity work we're doing, we're really trying to build lasting relationships so it doesn't feel transactional. So it's not transactional, so that people really start to feel a connection to both the city in which they live or work, but also to the city as an entity. They feel plugged into this organization and feel there's a role for them to help shape what we do, how they live, and to be involved. So any ways that we can do that, I'm absolutely down for it, and would love to find ways to build on what we've started.
I'm all for, this idea just popped in my head. On that card about events and community-led, putting a name or email organizer, any questions on how to organize a community event, contact this person. Because there are a lot of steps that people won't know, and they need somebody who's done it to teach them how to do it.
I love that. I definitely want to make sure that the organizers of the events have that capacity, because I don't want to dump that on them. And I'm also happy to be a contact with them well. So I think we can figure out what that looks like. Love to have more conversation about a good way to do that and communicate how the city is supporting these events in a way that really shows that it's community led. The city is there to support. The community is there to. The city is there to help make sure it can happen with the resources available. But it really is set by the community members. They get to lead this and choose how to celebrate their culture.
Yeah. I have to issue a correction. I do it every single time. It's not Eid, it's Iftar. Iftar is the dinner.
I was going to say, yeah, Iftar is
every single time. No, I'm surprised you didn't interrupt me after living in Turkey. You know better.
Any other questions or comments about events?
Well, I have one not about a Milwaukie event, but about a Portland event, which is that starting in 2016, I think, or maybe even 2015, we started walking in the big Portland Pride Parade. And of course, it hasn't happened the last couple of years, but I think it's coming back this year.
I was just looking that up. It's June
Not the
19th.
most well-planned things.
Yeah.
Is it? It's not. Last minute?
No, I mean, historically, it's a wonderful event. It's just,
Oh, well, yeah, it's a little chaotic.
it's a little chaotic. Yeah.
It's a little chaotic, but it's, I mean, you have to be patient because you're going to go wait in your assigned spot for like 3 hours to start moving. But once you start moving, it's really fun.
I'm happy actually to talk about Northwest Pride. Northwest Pride is obviously one of the largest Pride events in the region, and I know that many members of our staff, of our community, elected officials often welcome the event. The city itself, as an entity, I had some conversations about that. We've had an entry ourselves as a city in past years, and then they had no parade, and then they had virtual parades. One of the conversations I had when I first started working here, and meeting members of our law enforcement team, was about the tension between pride and police, because it's a weird thing. I'll be the first to say it's a very strange interaction, because we're talking about pride, something that originated out of the Stonewall riots, which was literally rioting after over-policing, targeted over-policing by the NYPD during the 1960s. That has always made the interaction between police and pride a bit weird and a bit of a strange tension. In recent years, that tension has grown, and a lot of organizations have decided that they either will not invite officers who are in uniform or at all to the event. As a city, as an entity, we have a police department. We have a large number of our staff who are members of this community who would like to be able to show up and support a pride event. And a commitment I made was that if an organization that was holding a pride event decided that they would rather not have police officers there, that I would not support the city as an entity being involved directly, because I think that that's an affront to our officers, who some of them may even be members of that community. I don't know. Certainly, many of them may have family members. But I felt that as an organization, as the city of Milwaukie, that was something that I felt just doesn't work for me to say, yep, we should go involved in that, but hey, officers who work for the city of Milwaukie, you can't be there. I don't think that's fair. And there's not a real easy way to solve that. By us supporting events that don't have that restriction, we sort of sidestep that. We can have an event that our officers can be involved in. Officers have some wonderful materials that they give out to the community that they make for Pride. And I didn't feel that it made sense for me to say, yep, we should, plunk down city dollars to be directly involved in that parade. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm discouraging anyone from being involved in Pride. It's a great event. Go have fun. I may go there. However, as a city, that was my commitment to the officers, that I would never recommend that. Now, people can overrule me, make other decisions, but that was my commitment, that I would not make that recommendation. Again, nothing against Northwest Pride or the organizers. I completely understand their stance. And again, it's always been a strange thing. I've marched in a lot of Pride parades, and many of them start off with motorcycles, police motorcycles, and it's always been this weird thing. And this is where we are.
Well, I was going to say, the last time it happened pre-COVID was the first time I felt that tension. I didn't feel that tension before, but also we did it with the county, and there was actually usually more county, Clackamas County Sheriff's Office presence than there was Milwaukie PD presence. But yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I can say this: the event we're having, anyone from Clackamas County who's listening, come on over. The water's fine. We as a city, if we're going to build bridges, if we're going to build a community in which there's mutual trust and respect, I think there has to be a place where people can come together. I think there are also places where it's perfectly fine to say, we're not comfortable with this here, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to question that. But as an entity that employs a lot of police officers, it's a little weird for me to say, yeah, we're going to do that, but you can't come. And so I think finding a place to do that, again, there's no perfect answer to this. and this is something that will evolve over time. Like I said, I've looked at a lot of pride parades, and with a lot of officers who are members of the LGBTQIA community. For them, I think, well, boy, what a weird space for them to be in, right? How do they navigate that tension? I don't have an answer for that. If I did, I'd probably be doing something else because I'd be way smarter than I am. But I think for me, that was a commitment that I made, and one that I will stand by. But again, if anyone wants to be in Northwest Pride, please go have fun. It's a great event, and we will have this event here that also provides a space for our officers to celebrate that community as well.
And is that the same day?
I don't know the date of Northwest Pride. I don't think so.
19th.
Is that the 19th? Mm-hmm. And ours is the 4th. So, and I believe the Northwest Pride is on a Sunday. It's on a Sunday. Ours is on a Saturday. That's actually intentional, so we didn't actually overlap. A lot of Pride events are on Sundays. We didn't want to accidentally conflict with something else.
They're on completely different weekends, but it's back to back with Juneteenth, our Juneteenth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. They will be back to back.
that's good.
And
it's Father's Day.
And it is Father's Day.
Historically, that is traditionally the conflict that Northwest Pride creates each and every year.
Yeah, it's almost always on Father's Day.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions about events? Just a few minutes. I have a couple. One last thing I wanted to talk to you about is our equity lens and equity framework work. We are right now in the final stages of choosing our consultant that will lead this work going out on for the next basically 2 years. It's going to be a lot of work. No matter who we end up going with, it's going to be a lot of work. It takes a lot of capacity to do this work. We're asking ourselves as an organization, we're asking our community members, we're asking our staff to really talk about what our community is, what it means to live and work and be a part of Milwaukie, and try to find out where we can be better. We have done a lot of work. I think we've done a lot of foundational work in the last year and a half and really 2 years. And I think we're at that place where it's time to sort of reflect on where we've been, what progress we've made. And I think that also it gives us a chance to say, okay, what have we missed in that time? Because it's easy once you get going to sort of, move past a lot of things and you sort of miss what's there. So taking a really structured, deep look at what we've missed, where our opportunities are, where our challenges are, and then pivoting to move forward. A city is not a monolith. A city, capital C, or small c. A city is not a monolith. There are all sorts of different views of what it means to be equitable. There are all sorts of inequities that we don't see. There are all sorts of intersections that we miss. And taking a really deep look at who we are, where we've been, where we're going, I think will give us a blueprint for the next 2 years and beyond. So I'm really excited about this work. I'm also just going to warn you, you're going to see a lot of me because I'll be popping up a lot to talk about that work with our consultants. And, it's a big lift. And for a city our size, it means that a lot of the lifting we'll be doing ourselves. But I'm really excited about the opportunities in front of us and where we're going. I don't have a lot of details now because we haven't chosen our consultant, but that work will begin in July. We'll hit the ground running at the start of the next fiscal year, and it'll take almost 2 years to get through all the work. But my commitment is that we will be back in front of you to talk about where we are. We will be transparent. We will be involving the community. So we'll be looking to you to talk to your friends and neighbors, looking to our staff to talk to their friends and neighbors, and to have these really hard conversations. And I think also, hopefully, some really enjoyable conversations about what the city is, what it can be, and how to get there. So that's the work coming up before us, and look forward to talking about more as we get into the summer. That's all I have for you today.
That was awesome. And I really appreciate it. this work is different than the other work we do at the city. And so part of what John and I have gone back and forth with is, well, do we have more to say? Like, do we have updates? What, you know, is this the right time? So we've sort of gotten to the point where we're just opening a conversation with you all, probably every couple months, whether or not we have content, because things are shifting and we're randomly realizing that you don't know what's happening and how it's happening. So I just wanted to compliment John and how he's been leading this and the steering committee. I think those conversations have been profoundly different and really interesting and have really built even that group into its own community. And it's been really beautiful to watch. So well done.
Thank you.
Good job.
I would say one thing. We should celebrate our successes and then, like you said, move on to what we can improve on. Because if we don't celebrate our successes, then people aren't going to know what we're doing and what we have done. So I think that's really important.
Thank you, Councilor Nicodemus. I appreciate that feedback. That is something that I think we have opportunities to do coming up this summer. And as we get into this work, I think that's a part of that work is as we talk about and celebrate our successes, it gives us an opportunity to open up a dialogue about where, you know, what's working. And that gives us a chance to also then say, okay, what isn't working or what could work better? So it's that cycle. It's absolutely a feedback loop of checking where we are and looking back and forward. There's a lot of that. We have a lot of change coming in the next 2 years. We're moving to a new city hall. A lot of things happening. And so it's going to be an interesting process. And in that, I think interweaving this work will help sort of, you know, give us sort of mileposts as we figure out where we've been and whether we've sort of tacked off course a little bit. And also just circling back to catch what we've missed. This is forever work. It's not, you know, I can't build a road for you and say, okay, done, cut a ribbon. Unfortunately, I don't have that. You know, I can't deliver you those types of products, but I think there are opportunities to talk about our successes and our challenges and to be honest about our challenges. You know, things are not perfect and they will never be perfect. I think I said to you in my first meeting with you, there will never be a day that I show up and say we have solved racism or whatever it is, right? We don't have that moment, but we do have moments where we can say we've made progress on this. I will say, and I think Kelly Brooks has Kelly presented the community survey yet?
No, she already did.
Already did. So there was a lot in that survey, I think. Hi, Kelly.
Right behind you.
That showed that we are making progress and that we have a wonderful community and we still have work to do. And so that's forever work. And look forward to talking to you more about it in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. That was great. All right, after the study session, council will hold a special session. The special session will also be held at City Hall Community Room. If you are on Zoom, you can stay in the same webinar as the study session. That I will adjourn our study session. Okay.
Sure if we were going to go off air or are we taking a 2-minute break?
We can take a couple minute break, sure. All right, we're off air.